All right, bonus YouTube session over here because trade conversations can't stop, won't stop, and neither will we here on the Locked On Nets podcast. Over there's Doug Norrie. I'm Adam Armbrecht. Go check out the full episode where we talk about Kevin Durant to the Phoenix Suns, Kevin Durant to the Toronto Raptors, and Kyrie Irving to the LA Lakers. Of course, everyone's hope and dream, getting Russell Westbrook to Brooklyn. But this one, Doug, is far more fascinating because it's the speculation that like bubbled up just as the weekend was kind of starting to round into form around Kevin Durant potentially returning to the Golden State Warriors and getting maybe resetting the timeline, as Marvel Universe would say, right? Let's just reset this timeline. These years did not happen, and I'm going to go back where I won a championship and help a team that's coming off a championship probably win several more championships.
Yeah, look, we didn't fold this into the regular episode because I can never tell if these kind of leaks are just a troll job by the teams. Like it's a Warriors troll job. You're like, maybe we'd be in on bringing Durant back, or like
Right.
it leaks out from Durant's side. I don't. Whoever knows with this stuff. We focused on the Suns and Toronto as like more realistic landing spots. I do think it's hilarious that we are at the part of the NBA timeline where like Durant could have had he could have just signed a contract and stayed in Golden State forever by the
Of
way they
course.
were set up and just legit won the championship every single year. I know he had torn his Achilles that one year. So maybe that next year they don't win. But that was the year they also basically like tanked, and then because everyone else got hurt, and then they got Kuminga and Moody and these guys. I will say the way the world works now with the NBA, who knows what these guys are thinking? Like it just doesn't seem to matter. Like nothing seems to matter, or what mattered yesterday doesn't matter at all today.
Right.
So I get, because think about it this way. What was the biggest problem with Kevin Durant leaving Golden State? It was his legacy, right?
Right.
It was a legacy reset. He won championships there. But he wanted to move on for whatever reason. Like, it was Steph's team or whatever. Came to Brooklyn under a new sort of guise. It did not work out. But he's totally fine resetting the legacy now to go play with Chris Paul, presumably, and win a championship.
Right
If
now,
we were to do that with the Suns.
because now I'm resetting my legacy from what it's been these last few years from where it was when I was leaving Golden State.
Well,
Right?
he's shown that he just short of having won the championship in Brooklyn, like he kind of can't win, right? Like because he won the championship and doesn't seem to have won in the eyes, and he seems very secure in his legacy. So like I'm not even sure he's like totally. I don't think he's really totally worried about it. But that's the part where you're like, oh, could you see him going back to Golden State? Obviously, a year ago you would have bet literally your life that it would never have happened. But now I don't think you'd feel comfortable doing that, simply because all these guys the Nets guys specifically, have become such wild cards.
Yeah.
That literally anything's possible. And Golden State, frankly, kind of has a package that looks kind of attractive. So I don't know.
And the other part, I guess, just from a legacy standpoint too, which I'm sure does not factor into the way Kevin Durant or a lot of these guys think about it, but almost like the Golden State Warriors winning again this past season now, like it frees up Kevin Durant from any weight of he's not catching anybody, right? He's not catching these group of players that have four championships, 5 championships, shy of going somewhere very specific and having an incredibly dominant run, which, as we've seen, is not easy even for the best players in the world like LeBron James, right? So I think that almost allows him to go, I could go back to Golden State and be with these guys again and win 100% be winning championships over the life cycle of my contract. And by the end of it, maybe I end up with 5, right? Maybe by the time my career ends, I pretty much checked every single box that I possibly could have wanted to in anyone's eyes, my own or the media's or the NBA landscape, etc. That being the case too, though.
Well, can I say one more thing about that too?
Yeah.
Is because him asking out of Brooklyn has already added all the fuel that will ever be needed for the fire of like whatever the talking points around Kevin Durant are going to be.
Right.
It does not actually matter what happens now. Short of him going to like Oklahoma City, if you went back to, here's the one way you could reset. If you went back to OKC and won a championship with like the young guys they have now, that would probably be the one way, because he's not going to happen. So whatever. But
he'd have to go to a team who has not had an established track record of winning, and
he basically had to do what LeBron did. Like LeBron went to Miami,
right?
Won, and then was like, hey, I'm going to go back to Cleveland, who's kind of a youngish team now. Had Kyrie at that point. And we're going to reset it. And they won. And he reset any ill will that had been built up over the Miami move, like was reset by winning that championship. Durant, it's just he's not going to do that though.
Should he
But
hold
Durant,
out for the Sonics to come back because they're gonna get that expansion done? Then he could go back to where he really started before they moved.
But you see my
No,
point though,
joking.
right?
Yes,
Like the
yes,
one,
100%.
like, if these guys actually worried about this stuff, which I think to some degree they do, the one story that could reset it for him is to do that move back to OKC, go win it with some young guys, walk off into the sunset, and probably all is forgiven. But that's never going to happen. So whatever. So short of that, anything else is going to have him being the villain from here on out, no matter what. So at that point, you should just do whatever you want to do. And if it includes going back to Golden State, then go for it.
If you're going to be the villain in the eyes of whoever, well, nothing would be more villainous than going back to Golden State Warriors who just won a championship, and you would make them, the most hated in terms of, look at this, the super team lives on, right, on the West Coast. And let's get to the package around this though, because it's so funny. Wiggins, speaking about a guy in terms about narratives around him, Andrew Wiggins has completely turned his career and perception of him around from his time in Minnesota, ending up there, ironically, because of all the trading that happened between the Nets and the Golden State Warriors with D'Angelo Russell. There you go. Boom. All of a sudden, Andrew Wiggins.
He was involved in that LeBron piece. He was involved in that LeBron piece too, going back, because he got traded for Kevin Love for the Cleveland one too.
Well, good for him. Good for Wiggins in so many different levels. He might, but I think you look at him, you say, well, obviously he's on the books for $33 million this year. You can talk about throwing in, you want to say Jordan Poole, you want to say,
you'd have to take it would be Kuminga and Moody, or like Kuminga, Moody, Wiseman, like two of those three guys. Like it would be some kind of young reset.
All these young players,
it would be some kind of young reset around those guys.
But here's the interesting thing. First, just on its surface, I think that can work. We've talked about other trade scenarios where the Nets want to get a young superstar talent. Wiggins is 27 years old, still is certainly entering the peak of his powers, so to speak. You probably get a little bit of trade assets there. The weird thing for me here would be, from a Golden State Warriors perspective, you obviously know what the results are when you have Kevin Durant on your team. I wonder is this. The Golden State Warriors are capable of, and they've shown themselves to be, we drafted our core, we built with them, we won with them, we added in another superstar, and in the background, we develop talent, we make smart trades, we draft well, right? And we're always replenishing the pool. I wonder if that emboldens them to say, we get to deplete all the young assets we have, we'll get those guys back eventually, like we're not worried about it. Or do they say, we just won a championship, we don't necessarily need to mortgage our young talent and some of our future to bring in Kevin Durant? Do you think that they're on the side of, hey, we did win this year, but it's not like it was it wasn't perfection. We needed some things to go right for us along the way here, including the emergence of Wiggins to check this box this particular postseason, and maybe we should double down by getting Durant back.
Well, see, they're like in a lot of ways the opposite of Durant, where they can kind of do whatever, and they're playing with so much house money that they could do whatever. And I think that in the eyes of their fans and probably the general landscape, they're good because they just proved it. They just won the championship with just that core three guys. Yeah. Now, if you want to just floor raise your future around maybe bringing back one or two more rings for guys like Steph and really getting them into like the ultimate list here, you actually could make a case for just scrapping the youth movement altogether and going for it, because again, you're good. You just proved it. You did it. You don't need to do it again. They just did it. They just beat the Celtics pretty easily with those three guys. Now, those three guys aren't getting younger. It would be nice to give them, what's the best runway for them to win championships over the course of like Steph's final 3 or 4 seasons. He's on the books for 4. I make $60 million in 2025. Adding a guy like Durant, who's on that same sort of contract timeline, would make them just a total powerhouse basically for the next 4 years. And you just know it. And so at that point, sacrificing the youth movement to do it, they could talk. Why not? They could talk themselves into it. Again, they have all the cachet. They just won. They can do whatever. It's Steph's team. It's cool. Like, they're the one team that can pull it off and just raise 2 middle fingers to everybody else, because like, whatever, dude, we won it. So now we just want to win more.
I was going to say, to your point, like they could right now be like, and now we're stripping this thing down for parts, and it's going to take us 4 years to get back to where we were, but we're going to do exactly what we did with Clay and with Curry and with Green. They're not going to do that, but like that's where they're at right now with their fan base. They could do anything they want in this moment.
Of course.
Does this package, and go check out the full episode that'll be up tomorrow morning for you, bright and early, midnight, over on YouTube, bushy tailed if you want it. with the other trade scenarios, is this an attractive trade package for the Brooklyn Nets on par with some of the other ones that we'll go into those details tomorrow? But Toronto, Phoenix, etc. Can the Nets look at this and say, yeah, this is as viable as anything? And
so what are we
we'll
talking real quick? Are you gonna? I mean, we're talking like Wiggins, Wiseman, Kaminga, Moody, something like that. Like
yeah,
it'd
so, I mean, say three. Wiggins is one, and then two out of those other three at least, and maybe a pick or pick or two, something like that.
I would start thinking about it probably based on the young guys. Like you're like, okay, Wiggins helps you probably win-ish this year.
Now,
Like
right,
like you wouldn't have to total. You're not going into the tank. He's good enough. He's completely overpaid, but he's a viable player. Like Wiggins and Simmons plus some shooters around them. Like is that?
By the way,
does that win some games?
1 year on Wiggins' contract, you could turn around and potentially flip him at the deadline this season to another team and continue to reboot yourself along the way.
Yeah, like, are you making the play-in with that team? It's probably close. Like, if
Right.
you're assuming you get something back for Kyrie here, and then like, you Wiggins absolutely balls out, and Simmons comes back fully healthy, and you keep some of those shooters like Harris and Curry. Could they vie for the play-in game with that team? It's close. I don't know, but you would and maybe Kuminga takes a leap. There's a lot of things you could start dreaming on with. You could start dreaming on with at least like the youth movement. Wiseman's still a total mystery, but he was the number one pick at one point at least. So yeah, I could talk myself into that for helping you a little bit in this year and having some young future talent to get behind. The difference with who we talked about before with Toronto is like with Barnes, at least you saw it, right? Like with Scotty Barnes, we saw a full season of what's going on. With the Golden State guys, you are still dreaming on what these guys are. Wiseman looked bad in his first year. Kuminga is super raw. Moody had flashes. None of them were at the level that Barnes was at right now. So that's the one difference. That's the one difference in the package, but you're getting more of them. So you're like, okay, maybe one of these guys works out.
Yeah. And that's why you talk about dreaming on, man, all throughout this week and the next couple of weeks, or as long as this goes on. We'll also talk about, you mentioned Ben Simmons there. That can still be another domino that falls inside the Brooklyn Nets organization. The reclamation can be somewhat swift, if not chaotic for Brooklyn, depending on how things go. Check out the full episode tomorrow, breaking down the other trades, obviously. And in the meantime, man, bonus content is what we're about on YouTube. Doug, I guess you could still send us out like you normally would. It feels like, that's the thing we do.
Oh yeah, make sure you subscribe to YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, go over and hit the subscribe. It's super easy. You just got to scroll down here a little bit and just hit the subscribe button below. Seeing the numbers really climb, leave a comment. Tell us if we're way off base with the Warriors thing. Like I said, this is bonus YouTube content. There's a reason we didn't put this in the full episode, but it's still fun to talk about. So tell us if you just think that this is at all palatable to you with the Warriors, or would the Warriors even do it? I kind of talked myself into like thinking the Warriors could do it based on just this 12 minutes that we've been talking.
There you go. That's done. Signed, sealed, and delivered, friends. We'll see you during the week right here on the Locked On Nets podcast.